Jessica Horn-Kennedy. I'm the Manager of Professional Learning at Gowrie, New South Wales, and also currently a PhD candidate at the University of Sydney. For me, the 100 Languages is very much about hearing children's voices and thinking about the voices that we hear more kind of loudly and overtly, and contrasting that with the voices that are quieter. So thinking about perhaps the child that's voice is not heard as fully, and for what reason is that voice not heard as fully. But I think the thing for me with the 100 Languages is that how do our systems and our ways of working with children perhaps sometimes not hear all of the languages, or what systems are we not aware of in our spaces, particularly that might not be fully allowing all children to have that voice. So thinking about how can we reflect on our practices, reflect on how we see this child and how we see this child, and how we maybe shift our ways of working with this child who might need something completely different from the one in the corner that's really quiet, and finding their play through perhaps their imagination more than the visual arts. So I think that we think about the visual arts because that's such a way of visually seeing representation and expression. But for me, play and really understanding play is also fundamental to thinking about 100 Languages, because children go to different places in play. They can inhabit other worlds through play. And I think for educators, being really real different types of play and slowing down particularly.
My name is Cressida. We're at Press Hill School in Kew. All of our classrooms are filled with things that children can use for play and for self-expression. So you'll see there are blocks in here, there is Lego, there are wooden playhouses, there are games, both educational and games that are for learning how to play games with your friends. There is lots of art materials in all of our classrooms. And the idea is that art or artistic expression isn't something that you have in addition to learning. It is actually central to all of the learning that we do. And as our children move through the PYP program and are exploring units of inquiry in the upper years, they often will create a tangible piece that represents the learning that they've been doing, be it sculpture, be it a digital piece. So there's always that emphasis on finding yourself and your own point of expression in the learning that is offered here. So these undercraft areas were all spaces that we could imagine children using and utilising. This one's had a couple of different iterations, so the sandpit is relatively new. But the idea is that children are still connected to their space and connected to their building, but are able to use these spaces both for learning and for play. And at Press Hill we have a long tradition of children building cubbies, and so these larger blocks are part of the genesis of building structures and creating spaces for play without the necessity to be hammering nails and sawing planks of wood. So this area serves for that, but you'll notice too that a lot of the blocks have made their way onto our playground fort, where they've been creating rooms and spaces up there as well. And there's always someone on duty in this playground, always supporting the play. But we do really value the idea that children can take measured risks. It's a really natural part of developing all of those senses and all of those judgments that we want children to be developing. And so while at first that might look quite alarming to some educators, for us, we know that, that with guidance, children can use those spaces really well. Welcome to our bush nook called the Pines. We consider this space really an additional classroom or another learning space. We redeveloped it as a bush nook a few years ago now, and try as much as we can to help the space regenerate with Indigenous plants. So we've partnered with Ceres previously, with the Boroondara Council and with Greenlink Volunteer Nursery, to try to move out some of the unwelcome plants like the ivy, for example, and then move in some native grasses and things. It is, like all spaces at Press Hill, an area where children are very free to explore and play. And while it's been designed with the paths and the fire pit and the creek bed, we often find that the children use the space in unique ways, or ways that we didn't think of. And if there's a bit of disruption around that, then we can have a conversation. So at the moment, some of our children have built a pond They've put a fountain in, as you can see there's a nice hose there. They're very proud of that. And then there's a damming system at the side of that. They had that moving around into the creek bed yesterday. And we had shoes off and children playing in the water and the mud. And it's the kind of play that lots of children who come to a school in the inner belt of a capital city may not have ready access to. And so we never try and shut this down. Some of us have memories of this kind of outdoor play from our own youth and lament the fact that there isn't quite enough of it around now. So it's really important when we have a space like this that we allow the children to imagine how they want to use it. So the pond is a great example of that. The other things that the children do are build houses into the tree stumps, the big tree stumps we have in here. They take the charcoal logs that have been used in the fire and then they create their own pretend fires. They use the camp ovens that are here. They move all the rocks out of the creek beds and build little paths or what look like cairns, but I'm sure they're not. And so they have this real freedom to explore using all of the natural materials that pre-exist in this space. There are other areas in the school where they can build and make cubbies and structures. And we try as much as possible to move children away from that kind of play in this area and to use this as a space for play in nature. Often kids for whom this is really important, this is the thing that they'll remember, this is the learning from school that they'll take home. And it's often kids who might, who might not sort of feel their space in the academic space. This might be the space that they really come alive. And so it's so nice when you've got the capacity to allow that to happen. Yeah, they really shine in their own right.